Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace, returning creator today to talk about a prose novel, actually. If you're a fan of the channel, follow all the time, you just saw this creator. I just had a chance to talk to Cullen Bunn at New York Comic Con, but as I said, I couldn't not have him on to talk about this, because even though it's not a comic, we're going to talk plenty of Cullen's comics as they relate to his first adult prose novel, Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World, which I read literally the entire thing on Saturday. I couldn't put it down. So thanks for allowing me to take a sneak peek, Cullen, because it's not quite out yet. But give everybody kind of the synopsis of the story and let them know when it's going to be available.
Yeah, so this book comes out on November 11th, so just a couple of weeks away. It'll come out you can get it at any bookstore, wherever you buy your books. So Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World is a story of a small town, small coastal town in North Carolina. And there is someone butchering residents and harvesting organs. And the story picks up from there. We've got an ensemble cast, all of whom are trying to, many of whom are trying to figure out who this killer is. And it goes from there. I'm being a little vague because the book has some big surprises in store for readers. It's the kind of book that starts out one way and then it's going to end somewhere that you're not expecting.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of on that note, everybody, when I was thinking about wanting to chat with Cullen about this, I was like, man, so many twists, so many like specific details I want to ask about. So what we're going to do, everybody, we're going to keep this spoiler free until the very end, maybe like the last 5 minutes or so. We'll give you plenty of warning. I'm going to ask some specific questions. So if you're, planning on reading it, maybe you want to save the last little bit for later, or if you've already read it, you can get a little more detail on those twists that Cullen's talking about, because I got to talk a little bit about detail. So we'll get a little spoilery, everybody, but not until the end, and we'll give.
Or you might just be someone who doesn't like surprises.
Yeah.
I have a good friend who reads voraciously, and every book he reads the last page first, and then goes back because he doesn't like to be surprised. So
That's hilarious. Well, I know people that they'll go and they'll read like a Wikipedia page about a movie or whatever before they watch it, like because they want to kind of be able to follow along. Hey, to each their own. But one of the things that I loved about it, and part of what I couldn't put down, and I know you're gonna dissemble about this or whatever, but the greatest horror writer of our lifetimes, Stephen King, right? And I got vibes of that from this because not only does it get crazy outrageous like many Stephen King novels do, but you have such a balance of the scary and the epic crazy shenanigans grounded in the emotion and the relationships of the characters. That's what I kept coming back to time and time and time again. Anytime maybe the action or the plot maybe starts to slow down a little, there's plenty of characterization there to pull us through. I'm interested in these character relationships. I'm interested in their dreams and their hopes, especially because part of the cast are seniors in high school, which are looking to move on to the next kind of segment of their lives, if you will. So I thought you did an expert job with that, but it is a kind of a big cast. So how tough was that, getting that balance right of characterization, action, drama, the tension of the horror elements, and that sort of thing? I imagine it, especially for being kind of your first adult novel, a little bit of a challenge.
It was a little bit of a challenge. And and part of the challenge came from the fact that I started to fall in love with these characters, even bit characters, and I started to kind of dig into these characters in a bigger way. I knew in this kind of book, which admittedly has a very high body count.
Oh yeah. Walking Dead's got nothing on this.
Right. I knew it needed to be, it was important that the readers knew who these characters were and liked them or thought they were quirky or didn't like them. I wanted even the smallest of characters to kind of have something that a reader could hook onto, something that they could connect with on an emotional level. And For sure, there are characters who I don't want the reader to ever feel that any of these characters are safe, because they aren't. But I layer in characterization and backstory and their hopes and dreams for everyone. As many characters as I could, I was layering in details just in case, so that people could hook onto them, and then feel bad when they die in a horrible way.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and again, it's part of what I loved about it, because you do add in those details, that enrichment of characters and you do it right from the beginning. Very first character we meet, in the book. And then you just never know who is. Well, we know so much about this character; they must be a main character. They're going to make it. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it's tough to get. It's tough to get scares, right? You don't get jump scares in a novel.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, if readers start liking a character and they get invested in the character, they can be afraid for what's about to happen to that character. So that was my reason for approaching each of these. One of my reasons for approaching each of these characters the way I did. The other reason being this slippery slope of I just loved them. I loved, there were moments where I was working on this and I was like, I just like writing about this character's book collection. This is something I'm really enjoying. And I would just go into that and forget the plot. I just wanted to dig into these, the things the characters were into.
Yeah, and again, it was compelling even when it wasn't necessarily the main plot, which was great. Well, set on a small island in North Carolina, fictional island or whatever, which really played into the story and the reasons of kind of the overarching big bad, or what you have, what if you will. So I thought that worked really well also. But do you have a background? I mean, you're from the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have a background in that area? What made you choose to go with the Carolinas?
Yeah, I do live in the Midwest, but I grew up in North Carolina.
Okay,
All through,
gotcha.
From being a baby to getting out of high school and everything. I was in North Carolina, and my dad used to take us a couple hours to the coast. I mean, at times it was almost every weekend, and because he loved to go fishing out there, and we spent time at this place called Harker's Island, which is very much embodied in this novel. I kind of wanted to bring back those memories of Harker's Island and bring it to life in this book.
Yeah, I've never been there. I've been through. I think I've been to the airport, maybe Raleigh Airport or what have you, but I haven't spent a lot of time there. But I felt very much. It reminded me. I spent a lot of my childhood in Santa Cruz, California. That's where my parents went on their honeymoon. So we'd go there every summer for vacation. So it's
Isn't that where all the vampires live?
Yeah, exactly. Santa Carla, Lost Boys. That was filmed there, what have you. So I got that vibe. I know exactly what you're talking about with the tourism and all that stuff. So that was great. So I mentioned all these different vibes I got, and anybody that watches or listens to the podcast knows I'm a huge fan of yours. So I'm going to name three specific properties of yours, three specific comic book series that I got vibes from, and you can tell us if that was something that's not necessarily intentional, but kind of on your mind as you were writing, or if you could see kind of. So I got a little bit of your most recent horror series that's coming out from Ignition Press that we talk about New York Comic Con. I got some Deluge, especially when we talk about trauma and guilt and that sort of thing. I got some Harrow County, and that's more about the family aspect, kind of relationship, what have you. And I got a little Six Gun with kind of the demonic part of it. So I love that even though they weren't overt, knowing that you were the author and having read those books from you, I got a little, I got at times reminders. So can you speak to any of that?
Well, I mean, maybe I don't know if any of it was. I don't know that any of it was intentional. Like I didn't set out and say, okay, this I want it to feel like Deluge or like Harrow County. But the thing about me is, I'm always dancing in the same thunderstorm. I'm always out there. All these things are part of me, and I don't see a need to kind of mask that or try. I mean, these are the stories I want to tell. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's the DNA is intermingled in all of these books. And I could probably go back to any of my, creator-owned comics and say, oh yeah, that's very, that's got a little bit of this in it. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's just that these are the kind of stories I want to read, and so they're definitely the kind of stories I want to tell. So they're going to be a little related, even distantly.
Yeah, and so that's a great endorsement, everybody. If you're a fan of any of those properties that I mentioned, a fan of Cullen's, you're definitely going to want to check this out. And I get it, right? Like, I'm that guy. I have so many comics that I need to read. I was just having this conversation with my wife because she's got so many prose novels that she wants to read. I have some prose novels that are, my to-read pile. And it's just always so tough to find the time. And so, yeah, that's, again, speaks to just how compelling this was that I did nothing on Saturday but read this entire thing from cover to cover. It was awesome.
That's awesome to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and
Because
how
I
do you?
wanted I approached this novel that way. I wanted it to be something that, I mean, it's a pretty long book, but I wanted it to be something that moved, and that moved at a good clip.
Yeah, and I think I told you this was one of the things too that I was thinking about it the next day, and the next day I was still thinking about these characters, thinking about the story, and not necessarily because you set it up where it could continue, and we'll talk about that when we get into the spoilery part. Um, but just because it just was so impactful, the story was so just kind of intense, if you will. And I think that kind of speaks to the pacing that you were just talking about, where and this thing goes. It really occurs over the course of a week. I mean, you literally have the chapters
Yes.
like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So, how challenging was that in terms of pacing? And were there things that you wish you would had room to put in?
Um, I don't know that it was a huge challenge. It was something I was always aware of.
Mm.
I wanted it to be, I never wanted this book to be a slog. Like, I didn't want it to be something that someone could get into and just feel like, okay, I got to work to follow this story. I wanted it to move. That was always intentional. The I don't, and I also don't know that that there wasn't a lot with a novel, unlike a comic, I can put what I want in it
Hmm.
because it's free range at that point. A
Right.
comic is all about economy.
Hmm.
And I always think that with every comic I work on, I wish I could add something, I wish I could have added this or added this. But with a novel, you can add it. And that's a dangerous, slippery slope because I found myself wanting to add all these elements, add more, add more. And at some point, the book's got to be done.
Hmm.
At some point, I have to say, okay, this is where it needs to end. And that was the biggest challenge for me. I wrote the first draft and I sent that in, and I got notes from my editor. And when I started addressing those notes is when it really hit me. Oh, I can add a lot more. I can
Hmm.
add more and more and more. And then every time I got it, I was trying to I found myself wanting to add more. And I finally had to tell myself I had to say, stop. Just cut this out. The story's told, and this is, I understand why George Lucas added all that stuff to Star
Yeah.
Wars, and what he was going through when he was adding more and more. I get it now.
Yeah, well, the other part is, as you said, you want it to move quickly, and the more you add, it can start slowing
Right.
down that. As fun as it is, it can start slowing down that pace. Well, obviously, you had some people that read it, early on, kind of beta readers, what have you, and give feedback and that sort of thing. And it's not out yet, but have you had any other people like kind of like in the same boat I'm in, where they've had a chance to read it, not necessarily a beta reader? Like, I guess I'm asking, have you had any feedback, or are we still too early to really say?
Yeah, some reviews have come in, and they've been pretty positive, and it's yeah, I got a Richard Chismar, who's a writer I really admire, a writer and editor I really admire. He responded today and told me what he thought of the book. It was a positive feedback. Library Journal uh, posted a really just a what I consider a glowing review about the transition from comic book writer to prose writer, and if I managed to pull it off. Um, so yeah, most of the reviews have been pretty positive. Even the ones that I'm a little like, oh, that one's not the greatest review, they say some nice things. So I've been happy with it.
That's
I'm
yeah.
I'm excited to see what what people think of it once it comes out.
Yeah, yeah, I'm right there with you because I think it's just so great, and I can see a lot of people really kind of jumping on the bandwagon and clamoring, okay, when's the next one coming out? Because it's so.
I hope, I hope it's always tough, right? Especially now, any kind of book, it's tough to sell.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I'm really hoping that some readers who only know my stuff from comics give this book a try, even because I really do think with the way I've written it and the pacing and some of the themes and some of the things that happen in the book, I think that folks who are primarily comic readers, this is an easy transition for them too. I
Yeah.
think they can get into this, get it, and enjoy the hell out of it, even if they don't read novels, even if they only read books with pictures. I wanted this to be something that was intentional too. As I was writing, I was like, I want this to be a book that folks who know my stuff from the comic book world can transition to this and still enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say especially the pacing really lends itself to that. And this is the thing that I would say that like I would love to see this translated into another medium, but I wouldn't necessarily want it to be a comic. I love the way it exists as prose, but it would make a
Sure.
fantastic like Netflix series. Like one episode per day would be fantastic.
Rated
But
M, rated
right,
M for mature.
right,
It's,
exactly. And the CGI budget would be insane as
yeah,
well.
well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they could maybe go practical with it. That would be
Yeah,
also
yeah,
just insane
yeah,
for many other reasons.
yeah, exactly. Well, we mentioned it being such a big cast. Was there any, we have a sheriff, we have kind of a female heroine, we have a couple different male heroes, one that's kind of on the nerdy side, one that's more on the jock side. Were there any of them that were a little easier for you to find their voices? Any that were a little tougher?
Um, it's a mixed bag. I feel like Willa, our lead, was pretty easy for me to get a hang of, and I felt that she was a very comfortable character to write. The nerdy character you mentioned, who's called the
The
Warlock,
Warlock, yeah.
um, he was a character that I did not intend to be play a big role in the story. He had a much smaller role when I outlined the novel, and I just loved him so much as soon as I started writing him that I was like, no, I've got to keep him. I got to expand what this character is all about. And he became one of my favorite characters in the book. Um, there were some, maybe it's no spoiler to say that portions of this book are told from the villain's point of view. And that might have been a little tough because I was really wanting, it was really important to me that this character's a villain. This is not a nice person, but I wanted even them to have little moments of sympathy
Hmm.
and to show that, oh, I wanted readers to think, oh wait, this guy's not as awful as you think he is. I mean, he is, but I like characters like that. Yeah, there's no doubt this person's up to just terrible deeds, but then they have little moments where you're like, oh, that was sweet.
Yeah,
That was-
yeah. No, he was great because he's the best kind of villain. I don't even know if villain is the right word because he does engender sympathy. But these characters where you don't agree on any level with what they do, but you understand why they're doing it.
Yeah,
You would
I
never do it, but you understand their motivation.
yeah, they're wrong. They're wrong, but okay, I see why they're wrong and see
Yeah,
what they're about.
yeah, 100%. Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, everybody, you can kind of see my background. I kind of put it in black and white, muted the color, so the novel itself in the middle would pop. But that's a picture that you actually posted on your social media from New York Comic Con, where they were selling some advanced copies of this. And seeing your book out there in the world at New York Comic Con, all these people around, kind of seemed like it would make it real. What was your reaction when you saw them there at New York Comic Con?
Yeah, it was a little weird. I've seen my comics at publishers' booths for years now,
Yeah,
decades. And you get kind of old hat to it, you kind of I get comp boxes, of comics and late in recent months I get them. I'm just like, oh, just put that over in a corner. I don't even
yeah,
want to open it. I don't need to see them right now.
right.
Um, and I'll get stacks of boxes full of trade paperbacks that if I ignore them for too long, there's stacks of them over there. But with this novel, it was such a different endeavor. Um, it was it was something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I mean, before I was writing comic books, I was submitting prose, short stories, and proposals for novels because that's what that's what I saw myself doing.
Hmm.
So this was a little different. It was a little it was a little overwhelming. I'll admit I felt taken aback by it. Especially, this book was on the table at the Simon and Schuster booth at New York Comic Con next to all these amazing authors and, next to Stephen, okay, no pressure. Let's stack up Stephen King's novels and then
Right.
here's Cullen's, first novel right next to it. So it was a little weird and exciting and overwhelming and it's something that I had to take a step back for a second and think about. And
Well,
and it's also when I'm signing at comic book publishers booths, I'm so used to it at this point. I'm very like, hey, what's going on?
yeah.
How are you? I felt myself sort of retreating. Like when readers were coming up with a book, I almost didn't know how to interact with them. It was uh, a different vibe for
Yeah.
me. It took me a minute to find my footing.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes, as you do more, hopefully more signings and
Oh yeah.
yeah, hopefully have more novels in the future. And yeah, I mean, I mentioned right off the top, and I again, we're not putting the cart ahead of the horse here, but I did get some, some Stephen King vibes because again, like what I thought you did, probably the best of any aspect of the novel was that balance between character and crazy over the top, terrifying
Yeah,
action.
well, and I appreciate that. It is interesting because I start writing this thing. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to write this kill scene. This one, and then at some point in writing, I start thinking to myself, no, no, I can't wait to write this character-driven scene that has nothing, that's not an
Right.
action-oriented scene. I want to write that. Um, so yeah, it was an interesting. It took me by surprise in what I enjoyed writing the most in the novel.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, as promised, everybody, we're going to get a little spoilery now and talk a little bit more in detail. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, don't want to be surprised or what have you, this is the point where you're going to shut it off. Go read the novel, come back and get a little more detail. Well, we specifically have to talk. It's almost like two acts. We talk all the time in stories, three acts, almost two acts, because the first half of the book, it's the serial killer. He's out there killing, and then just when they think they've caught him, the action actually ramps up because the kind of the being, if you will, that's sort of the motivation for him kind of unleashes their power ability. Monsters take over the island, what have you. Um, that was such a just a drastic change, and it almost felt like you would have to be in a different headspace to ramp it up because it's already an intense book, and it just ramps up and things go crazy on the island. So was it a different headspace for you? And did you jump around at all in writing scenes, or did you just write it like A to B?
I wrote this one pretty much A to B. I might have skipped a little bit, like I might have really rushed through a chapter and then moved on, but for the most part, I wrote it chapter by chapter. And this book uh, was done that way by design. I set out my initial when I was really thinking about this novel, my first thoughts about it is I sat down and I said, I want to write something that I call a switcheroo novel, where you think you're getting one kind of book and then bam, it's a completely different book. And there's very little ramping up between those two elements. I wanted that crazy explosion to happen and just go. It was off to the races. So so yeah, I don't know that it was two headspaces. It definitely was writing the book, the first half of the book and the second half of the book felt different because they were very different stories.
Yeah.
Um, and and there were many moments where I'm like, uh-oh, have I gone too far with this? Have I just, have I done something wrong? Have I created literally, have I created a monster? And I was like, oh yeah, I have, but that's the point. I
Yeah.
want it to, I want it to be a little bit of a monster, a lot weird, and really, um, I wanted it to take people aback when they got to that point.
What was interesting for me, and again, it's sort of inherent in the first half because it's a little bit, we're not 100% sure who the serial killer is. There's a little bit of a mystery, so there's kind of that inherent tension. But then when all hell breaks loose, we know who everybody is and what their roles are or whatever, but it's just, shit hitting the fan, if you will. But what was interesting is you did almost a mini switcheroo in the beginning because during the investigation, the sheriff's trying to figure out who it is. He goes and talks to somebody, and then we think. And I remember I had to take a couple breaks because it was a Saturday. I had to go, run errands here or there, and so I thought I knew who the killer was, and I had to go run an errand. And I remember I was driving, and I was thinking, I'm kind of surprised Cullen told us who the serial killer was, so quickly. I was kind of liking the tension. And then a couple chapters later, we find out, well, that's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily who you thought. So I thought that was great. And then to have the switch, I think that was part of what propelled it. You mentioned it, you wanted it to just go. And I think that's part of the reason that it went, if you will.
Yeah, I wanted to throw some red herrings in the mix. I wanted readers to think, okay, this person's the killer, or maybe, oh wait, maybe why would I mention, what this person's doing if they're not important, if they're not the killer, so there was a lot of that I wanted people to feel like a little bit of a whodunit. But yeah, I like that character a lot. I like that moment where I kind of say, this is him. We know it's him. And then we find out it's not.
Yeah, that was fantastic. The other part, we mentioned it before in the kind of the non-spoiler part about the body count, it being so huge. And yeah, nobody is safe. And there were characters I loved. I was like, no. Oh, was there, once it was all said and done, you're going back and re-editing, was there anybody that you were like, maybe I should allow them to survive as well? Or were you committed to only a couple people are making it out?
I was pretty committed to I wrote that line that's on the back of the book that says by the end of the week most of these people will be dead, or something like that. That was like an early version of that line was on my notebook for the book. I knew that it was going to have a high body count, and that was a lot of the book is about fate and escaping fate and escaping a destiny that you might not want. And a lot of it is also about, we don't get to choose when we go. We don't get to choose how it all ends up for us. But what matters is what you do while you're, before the end. It matters for these characters how they go out to some degree. And that was, there's a character that I didn't that maybe I felt a little sorry, that I was like, this is just, come on, Cullen. And my wife was doing was like one of the first readers for the book. And she at one point she says, just tell me that this character makes it out. I'm like, well, you're just going to have to read it and see. But yeah, I'm the most cruel to characters I like the most when I write. And that doesn't mean I kill them necessarily, but I'm pretty vicious to the characters that are my favorites.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe some of these characters do make it out alive, but they don't make it out unscathed. Nobody.
No one gets out unscathed.
Yeah, not at all. And there are
one character gets out completely unscathed. It's a super small character, literally, and gets out completely unscathed.
yeah, that's it. There was one line that Willis said, and I, as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, I think that's my favorite line of the novel. And then by the time I finished, I'd forgotten what it was, and I meant to go back and look it up so I could tell you what it was. I'll have to find it, and I'll shoot you a note to mention what it was. Do. Because I thought at the time it really struck me, and I stopped reading and reread it a couple times. But the other thing is Willa's best friend. She's got a little mantra. So I don't know if we want to spoil that or not, but I am
I think
curious.
it's fine. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's fine in the
so go ahead.
spoiler.
Yeah, tell everybody what it
It's
is and kind of your thought process on coming up with it.
so years and years and years ago, I had a friend who, whenever time, whenever the world was getting, was pressing down on on our shoulders, whatever was going on in the world, things are just going wrong, don't have any money, nobody likes you, you're up against, your back's up against the wall. And I'd say, how are we going to get through this one? We need to just look and say, gravity, friction, and faith. And, uh, and that has stuck with me 30, 30 years at this point, gravity, friction, and faith. And and so that's Sarah's little mantra that she'll say, how do we do this? Gravity, friction, and faith. Um, yeah, it's I say it all the time anyway, or at least I think it, times can get dark, but it just means, there are things you can't control. Uh, you fight against those things and you have faith that it's all going to work out in the end.
Yeah, and if that doesn't sum up, like with her espousing those words, if that doesn't sum her up as a character, from the vehicle she drives to
Yes.
yeah, she is a ride or die friend for Willa, like through thick and thin. One of
Yeah.
those friends where you don't even always like them because they call you on your shit, right? But you
Right.
always love them. You don't always
Yeah.
like them, but you always love them, and I love that relationship between the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
Uh,
She's the kind of friend we all deserve at least one friend like that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, we also mentioned the end, how this could open up, for more. And I gotta say, I love these kind of endings. It gets kind of cliche sometimes in horror movies where, at the end the monster opens his eyes or moves or whatever.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, but this is not that. This is something where if you don't come back to these characters, if you don't come back to this world, I'm completely satisfied with the way that ended. But if you were to, because it does open up for more, there is that possibility. So I thought that you did a great job with that, because it's not what it reminded me of most is kind of the real world, right? Like things don't get wrapped up in a nice neat bow. It just
Right.
doesn't, you know. And
And
that's kind of
and
how you ended this. So was that must have been a deliberate choice as well?
well, it was, but it wasn't the original ending that I
Oh,
had
really?
for the novel. And in fact, my editor and I talked a lot about it, and he said, you know, maybe put a little more, think about this one a little bit and how else it might end. And I went away and took a few days and wrote the ending that's in the book kind of whole cloth.
Mm.
It was a completely new, ending for the book. Um, and yeah, it's the kind of ending I like most. Uh, I like those endings where, oh, okay, there's more story here. Absolutely. I may never get it, and that's okay too, because I can start thinking about what I
Exactly.
think is going to happen.
Yep.
And I do that in some of my graphic novels. I've done that, and those are the ones that people come back and they say, "All right, when's the sequel coming out?" I'm like, It's not. I mean, there's no sequel for this." Um, and then who knows if I'll return to this world or not. I mean, I'm working on another novel now. It is not a continuation of this story. So, I might though. I mean, I can't, it's a never say never situation. If I get the right kind of, itch to return to this world, and and it doesn't take a lot for me because I just, I love these characters. I love telling stories about characters like this. But I'm also, like you said, I'm satisfied with where it shook out.
Yeah, and honestly, if I want more and I don't get it from you, like you said, I can use my own
Yeah, just you
imagination
can make up those stories.
to think about where it could go. Kind of
Yeah,
on
for sure.
yeah, and kind of on that same note, the last thing that I want to end with, Colin, and maybe we could have talked about this a little bit non-spoilery, but I don't know how much we want to get into it. The idea of where the title came from, because the villains that you use, we never get clear-cut answers on them either. Is it an alien? Is it a supernatural monster? Is it a little bit of both? Is it a kind of one of them just kind of the coalescing of the evilness of the world? Like it is kind of so up in the air, without concrete answers, and I think that really
Mhm.
worked as well. So talk a little bit about the thought process, but behind that.
Yeah, well, and this wasn't the original title. When I submitted it, it had a different title. Um, and again, the editors and the marketing team and the sales team said, hey, maybe there's a more evocative title we could go with. And then I came back and I just sat down and I thought to myself, well, what's the most metal title I can come up with? I want a title that sounds like it could be on the title of a heavy metal record. And that's where this one came from. And it is connected to, Bones of Our Stars. I mean, the uber villain of the story is definitely definitely represents that.
Right.
And then Blood of Our World, it's just, well, it's a fusion because of what these monsters, these creatures are doing once they erupt out of the earth. And I thought it was the title was a good mix of sort of this cosmic eldritch horror with real world, blood and guts horror. And that's what I wanted to go for with it. And yeah, I left a lot of that stuff off the table. There's no explanation necessarily of where there are hints, mm-hmm. and I know where they come from, and I feel like if you really read it and you look at it, you can piece those hints together into something that is very close to what I intended. But my philosophy on a lot of horrific elements is pretty clear. We're not meant to understand everything. This idea that we should understand everything is the most self-absorbed concept I've ever, that's not how life works. So yeah, you're not supposed to understand every little detail of what happened. It's the way I've written a lot. I write a lot of the comics I've written. I leave stuff for people to fill in the blanks. I want a reader's imagination to fill in the blanks and to make it worse, because they will. I mean, every time you're going to make it worse by what you're imagining.
Yeah, well, it's scarier if we don't understand, and scarier if we don't have all the answers. I mean, that's kind of the reason that we search for answers and we try to understand, is so that we have an understanding. So it's not the unknown, because the unknown is very scary.
Yeah, and I also wanted something that if 2 or 3 people who have read this book get together, I want them to talk about it and debate it. Some of the best conversations I've had with folks is debating some book or movie or comic or whatever that we've read and have slightly different opinions on. And I love those kind of discussions.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the connection, right, that I love, and why I love comics and I love, novels and that sort of thing, because at the moment when I'm reading it, I'm connected to, to your imagination with my imagination. You've obviously brought your life experience to, writing this, and now I'm bringing my life experience to reading and experiencing it myself.
Yeah, and that's the I've said this many places, comic books obviously are a collaboration. You're collaborating with an artist, you're collaborating with letterers and colorists and editors, and novels are maybe less of a collaboration because it's all on me and then with notes from from editors. But the collaborator that so many people just seem to forget, they forget to mention, you're collaborating with a reader every time you put something out, no matter what it is. You're collaborating with a reader and their interpretations of what's going on and their own experiences, coloring the book and, helping you envision what the characters look like. That's all drawn from your own imagination in a lot of ways. So I embrace that concept of I'm collaborating with a reader, and I want them to experience the book. It's interesting to me that the book will read differently to everybody who reads it. At least in some ways, different people will get different things out of it.
Yeah, 100%. Some people are going to identify with Warlock. Some people are going to identify with Willa. Some people, are going to identify with, maybe Sarah, who knows. So yeah, that's that's just the magic of fiction, and I love it because I've said this so many times, like the stories that we tell as a society, the fictions that we create, that tells us what we care about. Like you can look at a society at a particular point in time and look at the stories they were creating, and that will inform, what it is that mattered to them. And it's kind of the same thing here with the connection, and it's why, and we talked about this, at New York Comic Con with your Deluge series, about how, our fears and our traumas, and can kind of manifest and reflect and help us tell stories. And yeah, it's so interesting. It's what I love about horror as a genre.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, anything else that you want to share with the audience? I've already kept you way longer than I thought. We've had such a great conversation, as we always do. But anything else you want to share?
Yeah, just a reminder, the book comes out on the 11th. It's going to be available, in print, digitally, on audiobook. So, you can pre-order it right now, and you'll get it almost as soon as it comes out.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, I'll put a link to Cullen's Substack newsletter. He's up to so many different things, not just this novel and the comics. He's got other things.
Too much.
Yeah,
too much.
Yeah, his YouTube channel, his podcast as well. I'll put a link there, so definitely go and check it out. I'll put a link where you can pre-order the book as well. So, Cullen, thanks so much for taking the time. As I said, I love the book. It was awesome, and best of luck. I know you're going to be, probably a little nervous until it comes out and those reviews start coming in. And I expect that it's going to do really, really well, because it's just so well done.
Nervous puking is a real thing. So I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. And I'm glad you liked the book, and thank you for helping me spread the word about it.
My pleasure. So on behalf of Cullen and myself, we want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you're listening audio only or joining us on YouTube. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.